Hello everyone, welcome to Coastal Transformations webinar. I'm Chaitanya, your host for today's session. And today we are exploring a topic called as uh, how to run a successful chemistry call as a coach. We are delighted to have Anitha Aswath leading the session. Anitha is a ICF PCC and a valued faculty member at Coastal Transformation with over 20 plus years experience in leadership, development, HR, and coaching. Having worked with renowned organizations such as Cisco, Goldman Sachs, IBM, and Target India. With 1,000 plus coaching hours, she has coached leaders across India, the US, UK, Singapore, and the Middle East. We truly appreciate you joining us today, Anita. We look forward to the insights and practical wisdom you'll be sharing with all of us. Over to you.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Chaitanya. And what a delight to be here and to meet with all of you. I recognize a few familiar faces. Thanks so much for registering and for joining. I always say this, that all of the wisdom that's come my way over the last 28 years of being engaged as a coach, facilitator, consultant, and talent assessor has been the result of the many, many mistakes I've made. And I look at this session as an opportunity to have both a conversation about the topic as well as an exploration and observation of what it really looks like. So we have an exciting lineup of some content and a live demo as well that we have set up for you. So thanks very much for joining. I want to begin by asking you the question on a challenge, but before that, the brain always craves for certainty. So I wanted to make sure that you have a sense of what our session flow is going to look like. And in a nutshell, that's where we're going to be spending our time and energy today. We look at the challenges and how you're positioning yourself, as well as the session, and dive deeper into understanding what is this really all about. And then we'll transition to what is the foundation? What are the desired outcomes? Is there a structure that you can bank upon? And then, of course, we'll have a live demo followed by a breakout room discussion. And then we'll come back together as a group and debrief the session in the main room. And then what's a session without some courageous, bold decisions we can make? So where can you be courageous? And how to avoid common mistakes or the oopsies? And what are some things that don't require any talent that we can actually actively engage in? And then we wrap up the session. So I'm going to begin with a question, and maybe you can unmute and share very briefly or post it on chat. What is the biggest challenge about chemistry calls for you as coaches? So go ahead, take about 30 seconds to either unmute and share or place it on chat. And I'm going to try and read your responses as they come up here.
Yeah, so I don't mind starting, Anitha.
Mhm.
Challenge that I faced is that either the coachee or the sponsor, they take up a lot of time sharing the context and the development needs for the individual.
Yeah.
And then you sort of are left with, because you want to pay attention and you want to give,
Yeah.
listen deeply
Yeah.
for what is said and not said. But then you've
Yes.
lost that time in terms of
Yeah.
positioning yourself.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So the question then becomes, how do we expand that window and create adequate time to do a deeper exploration? Thanks very much for asking that question. Vikas says performance pressure. Yes, it's a huge sort of burden that we sometimes place on ourselves, and it becomes a big challenge. Shashikala says, impassive. Yeah, when you don't get anything from your client, that's harder. It's probably sometimes easier to deal with some kind of a reaction, even if it's a little unpleasant. But if you don't get anything, that's kind of tough, isn't it? Because you don't know what's going on. Yes, that's very, very true. Explaining coaching versus other modalities. Okay. So Ramya says that's a challenge. Maybe I can understand a little bit better during the course of our session. Where, what's the sort, where exactly is the challenge there? Judgments made by the client. Yeah, well, it is a little bit of an assessment, and maybe there is some judgment that comes from the client. And it's their prerogative, but how do we cope with that? How do we deal with that? Deepak says, thanks, Shweta. Oh, they're coming fast, thick and fast. So Deepak says, sensitizing what is and what coaching isn't, whereas the client is seeking a quick fix. Yes, because they've been dealing with the challenge, or they've been thinking about it for such a long time. They want to be able to resolve it as quickly as possible. But coaching isn't about fixing, right? So how do we move through that conversation? Great comments and responses here. Thanks very much. I find trust, is that trust? Yeah, trust is difficult as a group of potential clients. I think that's what you mean there. Yes. So how do we build trust within the first few seconds or first few minutes? How can you add value while not giving answers? Oh my goodness, a big challenge, because throughout our careers, we've been recognized, acknowledged, praised, admired for having the answers, right? We have the answers. We know what to do. We know exactly what direction to take. People depend on us for that. And therefore, we've been rewarded. And then you go into a space of not knowing. You are the expert of your life, my client. I'm here to co-create and collaborate with you. So how do I add value? Not converting the client. Yes. So how do we, look at that? Do we see that as a failure? Do we see that as learning? Do we see that as data? Do we see a pattern coming from that data if there have been multiple instances? How do we make sense of that, or what is called as meaning making, right? Discussing clear scope of what's within scope, what's outside of scope, what are the expectations, what are the boundaries, how to not make it look like a sales pitch. Yeah, we all have a discomfort, right? We don't like being sold to. How many of you love receiving calls from Bajaj Finance? Those of you in India will be very, very familiar with people who call, hi, I'm calling from Bajaj Finance, and I just want to scream. So there's a discomfort we have in terms of, oh my goodness, I don't want this to be a sales pitch. Explaining coaching versus other modalities, yes. Individual clients not familiar, but how do we explain in local languages? Yes, so different kind of skill and ability, and not just the semantics, but the sometimes English is bereft of the kind of nuances other regional or native languages are capable of. And sometimes it's actually easier to have a conversation in those languages, but then you need to have the ability to speak those, but not just a chit chat or a conversation, but in a coaching call. So data, not sure what you mean by data. You can say more about that, but great articulation of some of the biggest challenges. Hand on my heart, I will share with you that they are true for all of us. Some of them for some of us, some others for a few others, but they're all common challenges that we prepare ourselves to understand or decode before we go into a coaching chemistry call. And my hope is that after our session today, you'll have a slightly better understanding of, okay, here's a framework, or here's a structure, here's an approach that I could use in order to increase the probability of getting to a more optimistic, positive outcome and reduce the probability of, I'm not sure we want to go ahead with this coach. All right. So that's my hope. And of course, it's a collaborative effort. I love that you were so interactive. Thank you very much. It's stuff like this that really make these sessions meaningful and a good use of time for all of you. So let's begin by looking at how do you position, right? Both the call and yourself. My apologies. I had to get a little bit of water there. So on the one hand, there's the craft. On the other hand, there's the tactics. Before you go into the tactics, my encouragement to you would be to position yourself as somebody with calm authority, competence, confidence in your craft itself. And with that comes authenticity, and with that comes a sense of this person knows what they are talking about. They also know what they don't know, and they're open and transparent about that. Instead of seeming like, I'm going to be clever and use certain tactics there, by all means, use tactics. But I think I would place craft at the front and center before I bring tactics into the picture. Now, even as you do that, I'm sure there's a question that's on top of your mind, which is coming to the surface through all of your questions in terms of what on earth is a chemistry call? It is sometimes called a discovery call, a strategy call. So somebody said, hey, I'm worried that I may be seen as a sales pitch. So how do I avoid doing that? So is it really a sales pitch? Or is it pure coaching? Is it really optics management of your brand and how you're seen and how you stand out and what you want the client to think about you? Is it about the brand you're representing? If you're representing Coach to Transformation, if you're representing Mirak, is it about us? Is it about our brand? Or is there something more? And truth be told, I will say it's a little bit of all of this. But at the forefront, it's a mutual discernment conversation. And what that means is it's a place of trust and rapport and psychological safety. And it's a place where you have a conversation and ask yourself, is this person for me? Is this something that I really want to do? Where's the sweet spot? Where's the common points of connection for us? What do I discern from this as a client, as a coach, right? So it's a mutual discernment conversation, which is always collaborative. It is based and rooted in the foundation of trust. And it's based and rooted in the foundation of curiosity and, a mindset of how can I help? How can I support? How can I create momentum or movement? So that's what it's really all about, in addition to some of these things that you're seeing on the slide, right? And a foundation that I usually look at, it's very warm here, so please excuse me while I continue to sip on some water. So, I could go into chemistry, chemical formulae and whatnot, but I want to keep it real. And this is my foundation that I usually create. And it begins with curiosity. It begins with a childlike curiosity that says, I don't know anything. And yet, I am here to discover, I'm here to learn. Maybe I'm here to unlearn. I'm here to peel the different layers that the client is ready to share. And how do I continuously be curious about that instead of forming opinions or preconceived notions or forming judgments, etc.? And the second one is a warmth. And I always, and I will add a caveat here, right? I think it's important to be warm in coaching conversations as a coach. but that warmth has to, it's like a little, continuum where you adjust. How warm do you really want to be, depending on what you're receiving from the client? If the client tends to be very data driven, very logical, very left brain, very black and white, then you adjust your warmth to ensure that it doesn't overwhelm your client. You adjust your warmth in a way that it moves closer to where the client is, right? And without losing your authenticity and without losing your own identity and style, but knowing when to, dial up and dial down that warmth component. The next one is, of course, have a structure, because if you don't have a structure, then we might as well be having a conversation over popcorn and Pepsi, and we're going to have fun and it can be entertaining, but it's not really driven by a structure or a goal. And then I usually find this as sort of the backbone of coaching, and certainly the backbone of coach chemistry calls. A service mindset, which basically says, I'm not here to prove to you how great I am. I'm not here to show you my prowess of what a fabulous coach I am. In fact, this is not about me at all. This is about me only to the extent that it can be of use to you. It can serve you. It can help you move from wherever you are right now to a place that you desire to be. And therefore, it's a place of humility and confidence. It's a place of courage, as well as a service mindset. And when you look at a combination of all of these, I would say this is sort of the foundation for a successful chemistry session. I'm just looking at the time and making sure we're okay. Does anybody have any questions before we move to the important part, which is the structure? Any big burning questions anybody has that you wish to share?
Hi, Anitha. I had a quick question. I've very
Yes.
recently embarked on the coaching journey, so pardon me if my question sounds a little immature. But the question that's been playing on my mind is it acceptable for a coach to decline a coaching engagement following a chemistry call if they do not feel comfortable with the prospective client? And if so, what would be the right way of handling such a situation?
Yeah, great question. No question is kosher. No question is immature. Thanks very much for asking that, Kamisha. Is it acceptable? I think it's necessary. And you do that after evaluating all of the variables, all of the factors, particularly when it's an individual coaching engagement, where you're not tied to an organization, where you're not aligned with the, with where you are, you're a faculty or you're an empaneled coach. And if it's a one-on-one engagement, it's necessary to be able to look at that as, I've looked at all of the factors, I've evaluated all of the variables. I'm not sure this is a great fit for either the coach, either the client, or for myself. And this is where I'm coming from, right?
Sure.
And as you make the decision, and I've had to make the decision a couple of times. And as you make that decision, what's important is to be able to do an honest reflection and evaluation
Sure.
of everything, that's on the table, right? And then look at what's negotiable, what's non-negotiable. Is it a values mismatch? Is it, a style mismatch? Is it a personality mismatch? And if it's a values mismatch, it can be very, very hard to find a middle path or middle ground there. But if it's other things, which ones are non-negotiable and which ones are, I think this is my ego coming in the way. What am I learning about myself through this? And then when you convey that message to be able to convey that message in a manner that is respectful,
Yeah.
that is transparent and authentic. And also, if you can do the homework and say, I'm so sorry, this isn't working out, and this was not what we had in mind when we began. But here's some other coaches that, I would recommend. I think they may be a
Lovely.
better fit for you. Would you consider?
Yeah.
So that way you're sort of closing the loop on the conversation, but at the same time, you're keeping the door open for a future conversation. And sometimes
Sure.
it's, it may be about now's not a great time, or,
Yeah.
um, somebody reached out and they were extremely happy after the chemistry session. They said, I'm so glad we found you. This is perfect.
Yeah.
Please share a proposal, etc. And when I shared the proposal, they said, we don't have the budget and we can't do it right now. So
Mm.
I think it's a necessary part of that whole,
Yeah.
coach-client conversation that you have. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
welcome.
Thank you so much.
Of course, you're welcome. So in terms of a desired outcome, and if those of you who have other questions, I want to make sure I don't lose anything if there's something that has come on chat. Ranjani says, reflecting on what you mentioned, they're not pure sales pitches. It could be a check. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all of those things, right? 100%. It's all of these things and more. Sometimes what's not said, what's not obvious, what's not, clear and visible and, but it's there on the surface. So how do you tap into that and make the most of it? So what are the desired outcomes? I think clearly they're, generally speaking, you see that picture there. There's a great book by, Parker Palmer, On the Brink of Everything. It's a book that is life-changing, and I would recommend you take a look at it if you're interested. And that's why I was inspired by that book to look at this image, because it's about someone ready to take a jump, take a leap, right? So the first one is the client needs to have clarity on what this is, what this isn't, what it can fulfill, what it cannot fulfill, what are the boundaries, um, why do I need that? What is the problem, or, what is it going to solve? How is it going to create greater momentum? How is it going to help me move forward? Is it developmental, etc.? And then the second one is coach credibility. Now, coach credibility isn't just in terms of, oh, I'm a PCC, I'm an MCC, I'm a foundation certified team coach. Yes, it's that and much more. And that is in terms of how you show up on that call, right? Are you credible? Are you reliable? Can I trust you, right? And then the third one is, of course, how can they make a clear decision or an informed decision based on whatever I have heard today, right? So those are sort of the outcomes you look for from a great chemistry call. So I'll spend a few minutes on this, and then we'll jump into the demo. We'll probably look at 12 minutes, 12 to 15. I don't know if we can do a 15-minute one, but I'm certainly looking at a 12-minute demo. All right. So here's a 5-part structure that I would recommend, beginning with what is the context, right? Because context is everything. Where is this client coming from? What is their background? What is their industry? How much homework have you done about their background, the organization background? How much information do you have about that? So making sure you have access to enough context, not too much that you want to be drowned, that you're going to be drowned, but just enough to really put the pieces together of that jigsaw puzzle. The second one is to, of course, as coaches, we always talk about this, right? Your undiluted presence, which means if it's on video, please make sure your video is on. You're professionally dressed, you're on time, you're respectful, you're listening, you're paying attention, and you're clued in to not just what's being said, but what is not spoken. What seems to be there, like an elephant in the room, or sometimes like a little bit of a ghost in the room, but it's not, no one's talking about it, right? So demonstrate your undiluted presence and then share with them, this is my approach, and understand that they may be working with other clients. They may be interviewing or doing chemistry call. They may have a lineup of coaches that they're doing chemistry calls with. So what is your approach? How is it different? How is it bespoke to their context, their situation, their world, their landscape? What changes are you willing to make? What are the nuances that you've built into that approach? Are there, additional things that you're giving as, sometimes you'll see this, right? This is worth X number of dollars, and I'm adding this as a bonus. Okay, so how is it going to serve them? And then invite them to the decision, which is the bold question of, so having heard everything you have over the last 15 minutes, would you like to explore working together? Many coaches become a little shy, become a little hesitant because we feel, oh my God, I don't want to come across as too salesy. Ugh, I don't want to go. But then who'll do that for us, right? There's an organization, if we have, if we're empaneled with an organization, the organization does the bulk of that heavyweight lifting, right? But then, if you're working individually, even to ask, how does that sound? Would you consider working, would you like to explore working together? Now, all of these are within a super sacred container. And that super sacred container is what I call the sacred zone. And that's why I choose white, because white is open space. White is untainted by judgment, opinions, preconceived notions. White is full of trust, rapport, unknowing, not knowing, right? White is coming from a place of, I trust you. I'm here to explore what it means. I'm here to work with you. I'm here to see what's going to emerge, right? And it's collaborative. It's built on the foundation of trust. Okay, so I'm going to pause here and see what questions you have before we move to the live demo. We're running a little bit behind schedule, but we'll jump into the demo very, very quickly. And I have Aditi, who's very graciously volunteered to be my client. So we'll jump into that in just a second. Okay. So the two of us are going to cook up a storm, I think. I don't know what we're going to cook up, and that's the thing, right? We have the ingredients in terms of the structure, but we don't know, and that's the beauty of coaching, right? We don't know exactly what's going to emerge here.
Anitha,
Yes.
I have a question which I put in the chat box.
Oh, I didn't see that. My apologies. Yes.
Sandeep Kalra.
Yes. I don't see your question, Sandeep.
Okay. So since
Oh yes, okay. How do we guard against the power imbalance and reduce curiosity or prejudgment bias bringing in too much context? That's a huge one. Power dynamics are at play in every coaching conversation, in every coaching coach client chemistry session. And how do we guard against that really goes from setting expectations. That's a simplistic answer that I'm sharing with you right now. It begins by setting expectations. It begins by clarifying what is at the heart of this and how power, title, position, authority, etc. They all have a place. And they have a different place in different conversations. And there's a place where those need to be addressed because those are your stakeholders and those become your important stakeholders. So maybe it's not in the space of the coaching call, it's outside of that in a stakeholder conversation, right? So helping your client or your panel of clients understand, you don't diss them and say, oh, there's no place for position, power, title, authority here. Mm-mm. Because when I do that, I'm basically diminishing everything they bring to the table. And you don't want to do that because that can be very, very tricky and it can jeopardize the call, right? But you can say what we're placing at the front and center of this coaching engagement is, how do we serve this group? How do we serve this leader? How do we serve this particular team? And then when we look at all of that, now let's examine what are the power dynamics at play here. How can I, as a coach, understand that better? How can you, as my panel, help me understand that better? And how do we use the power, position, title, authority in service of something bigger and better, right? And that's where you bring in that conversation. Okay. I hope that addresses your question.
I may be required to discuss more, because for the reason it is when we are studying too much about the background, we may step in biased with a lot of chatter in our mind, and which is already playing.
Yeah.
Rather than, because we are required to focus on the person,
Yes.
not the problem. And we may actually get biased towards. So that's my predicament. And since you have your structure to follow, it may not be the right moment now, but we can certainly get into detailed conversation on this.
By all means, because then it becomes a journey of how do I, every instance, every coaching moment, every conversation, how do I clear the space and make sure that for the next 30 minutes, the biases will come, but how do I say, not now, right? Very much like someone who's learning how to meditate. So a meditation expert will tell you, oh, it's not about the thoughts not coming. They will come. But how do you say, let's go back to my breath. Let's go back to the focus, right? So it's about going back to what really matters. We'll have a separate conversation around that. Aditi, my friend, thank you very much for volunteering. Hi. So we'll do maybe a 12-minute, 10 to 12-minute conversation where we have a chemistry call. And I just have my timer here, so we're at 6:33. So so by the way, to the rest of everyone, to the rest of the group here, we haven't met before. This is the first time we're meeting. I really don't have a sense of what Aditi is going to bring to the session. So we're keeping it as realistic and as natural as it would be in any coaching call. Okay. So let's go with that. And Aditi, it's great to meet you. Thanks for making time for this session today. And where would you like to begin?
Thank you, Anita. So, so I have been thinking about something for a very long time. So I have a dog boarding business, and it's mostly because I have loved working with dogs a lot. So working with dogs, spending time with them brings a lot of love and peace in my life. Since the past 1 year, I have had these questions if I should maybe expand my business. But there are periods when I feel that that is the right thing for me to do. But then there are periods where I feel maybe that is not the right thing for me to do. Mostly because I'm not sure if when I grow as a business, how do I make sure if the same ethos or if the same care, because it is caregiving for an animal, how do I ensure if I if I have other outlets, how does the same caregiving or the same ethos work in these other places? And am I even that person who would like having multiple dog boardings, or if I'm that person who would like to have one small setup and be happy with it, or if I'm that person who would have multiple setups throughout the country and that would make me happier. So I'm kind of not able to figure out which person I am in this business.
Mm.
And I don't want to lose that peace and love that this thing brings to me in this journey of growth.
Wow. It's always magical when a client comes in with as many questions as you have. Thank you. Thank you for giving me a glimpse into your world. So it's a great foundation to what we're going to do over the next, 10 minutes or so. And what we're doing is a discovery session or a chemistry session. And the purpose of our session is to try and understand where I can be of service to you, to explore what you need. I can clearly see you have lots and lots of questions, and there's a theme that I'm seeing there, which is really about expansion, and expansion on so many different levels of many different things, and even something around your identity. Who will you be? It sounds like that's what we're going to be exploring. I'm curious, Aditi, have you had a coaching conversation before with a coach?
No, this is my first ever coaching conversation with any coach.
Okay. Well, what a privilege it is for me to be the first one. Thank you for the opportunity. I want to share with you what coaching is and what coaching isn't very briefly. Coaching is not consulting where we give you an answer, we give you a solution. Consultants are paid to fix problems. So I'm not here to fix problems. I'm also not a mentor, which means a mentor is an expert in, let's say you're in marketing. So somebody in marketing who is an expert, who spent many, many years with great tenure, they would be a mentor for you. So I'm not a mentor. Not really working with you in the capacity of a therapist or a healer, because I'm not looking at pain or trauma that you have experienced, and you're looking at how do you overcome that to address a current situation and then move forward. What coaching is that it's collaborative, it's co-created, and it's designed by what is the goal you have in mind, and how do we explore this goal in a dialogue, in a conversation. And what's most important is that, as with all other modalities, here too, psychological safety and trust play a huge role, which means that everything you share here stays here. And as an ICF accredited coach, one of the things we abide by is the coaching ethics, which means that our conversations are confidential. And it's important to always abide by that, to preserve the trust and integrity of our conversations. That's what coaching is really all about. My coaching philosophy, I would say, is, a combination of curiosity, compassion, and courage. So all of the curiosity comes from a place of, I wonder what, I wonder why, I wonder where. So always coming from a place of curiosity. Compassion, because I'm not in your place or position at the moment, and therefore I can't pretend to understand or know fully. So great compassion for who you are, what you do in your life situation, and courage in terms of asking questions that may feel like I'm challenging, but I'm challenging only so that we create enough space to see something differently, not for you to feel good and feel nice. That's not my role as a coach, right? So let's go back and I'm just looking at the time here. Let's go back to what you shared in terms of the whole expansion theme. Now that you've heard a little bit about what coaching is and isn't and my approach, what's at the heart of this conversation for you, Aditi?
I think it's probably for me to realize what would actually work for me as the kind of person I am, and then figuring out how to take this forward. So, so not just going by what other people would say, like if these are the numbers, then you should be doing this, but understanding what my core is, and then deciding what should be my next step.
You show great awareness of what of understanding of who you are and where you want to go and who you want to be. What does your intuition inform you about that direction?
I'm kind of not completely sure about that, because I would like to believe my intuition is saying stay where you are. Otherwise, maybe I would have already taken the plunge. But then sometimes I feel maybe it's the fear of things not going right, and that is maybe I'm reading it as intuition. And so I'm not completely sure. Like, there are days where I feel I'm not, like, I'm putting it on the back burner because of that. And there are days where I feel confident. So I'm not completely sure if I'm actually weighing all the pros and cons, or I'm not sure how to go about it.
It sounds like there are things that you're very sure about, and there are things that are a little bit of a puzzle. What is it that you are sure about?
I think what I'm sure about is that I like dogs and I really like working with them, and kind of understanding how, when a new dog comes, their behavior, and working with them and the whole journey. So that part I'm sure of.
And what's the part that's blurry for you? You already mentioned the word fear. Say
Right.
more about that.
So I think with expansion, there comes this thing of taking a lot of risks and growing as a business. What if while expanding, it hampers my existing business? It affects the current perception of what the services I offer right now. Um, mostly this. And what if then all this expansion, I lose the joy of these little things that I work with every day.
So it sounds like love of dogs and the space that you have with dogs and the risk, they're both almost on the same on the same in the same space.
Yeah.
And what if things were to not go the way you wanted? What would happen then?
So that's another challenge where I feel that it might hamper what I currently have as well. And I don't want that to happen. So it's basically deciding if I should take the risk or not. And also deciding if I am that person who would like that big expansion in business, or if I'm the person who would like, if I'm happy with this thing, or would I want to be famous, or would I want to have multiple dog boardings and everything with the same branding? And am I that person, or am I this person?
Yeah.
That's a question that I need to answer.
Yeah. So I'm hearing three sort of overarching themes, Aditi. Do I want to take this risk and expand? and risk what I already have or losing what I already have? Is this the person that I want to become? And what happens if I do or don't become this person? The third one. Is that what you said? I want to make sure I understand. I recall that correctly.
Correct, correct. Yeah, these are the three major questions.
Yeah. And I've heard the theme of who I am, who I want to be, who is this person? I've heard that pop up at least on 3 different occasions. Who is Aditi?
Is that for me to answer?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a really tough question.
What comes to mind?
I think Aditi is a creative person who likes to explore new ideas and go with the flow sometimes, be open-minded about certain opportunities, and do everything with a heart full of love.
Wow. What a great beginning to what could be a very expansive view of who Aditi is. Aditi, with your permission, I want to share with you a card. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
I want you to take a moment and reflect on this question.
Okay. Sure.
Okay? You don't have to answer that right now, but it's a question that I want you to reflect on. And it's a question that I want you to just be with for some time. We may not be able to explore that or peel the layers of that question, the response to that question in our time today. But that's a question that I want you to reflect upon. Okay. And so thank you for playing along. I'm going to take a moment to do one last thing, and then I'll sort of wrap that part up of our practice session and go into, the last part of it. What I have in front of me is a set of vision cards. Okay. They're double blind. Well, they're not double blind. They're single blind in the sense that I know what these cards are, but I don't know which one I'm going to pick. Okay. So I've shuffled all of them. I want you to please pick any one card from this shuffle. You can pick something from the top, from the middle, or from the bottom. Pick any one.
I would go to the bottom.
The last one?
Yes, sure. The second last one.
Oh, okay. She's very specific. The second last one. I feel like some kind of a soothsayer, but I'm not. Okay. And the card that came up for me is this. And I'm just going to let you take a moment to reflect on whatever is emerging there and ask you, what do you see, Aditi?
It kind of feels like the phoenix rising from the ashes, or breaking free, or taking the leap, kind of a message or a visual that I see.
Yeah. So the vision that I heard is that of expansion. And there's a very real fear of what happens when I take these risks. And what I want to leave you with as part of our practice session is to be able to reflect on what this vision means to you. Where's the expansion? What are the calculated risks you can take, etc. So I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you very much for playing.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. I know that was a very short conversation, and now you get a sense of what coaching will look like and how it's built on dialogue and sometimes uncomfortable questions. Typically, our coaching sessions are between 6 to 9 months long. between 60 to 75 minutes every session. And then in terms of access, we can connect on WhatsApp or email to make sure that, life happens between sessions. So how do we ensure that,
Right.
we continue to stay connected? So based on everything you've heard and what you've seen, are you willing to explore this idea of working together?
Yeah, I think I would love that. I just need a little more details on how this fits into my schedule and what it means to me money-wise. Otherwise, I
Absolutely.
would love to connect with you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for that. What you will see in your inbox a little later this evening is a proposal that outlines all of these things. And of course, we'll have a deeper conversation on your primary goals, your secondary goals, and ensure that every coaching session is aligned to those goals and how we can work together to keep moving them forward. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time and for sharing a glimpse of your world and your love of dogs. Thanks
Thank
very
you so
much for
much.
that.
Thank you so much, Anita.
You're very welcome. So that, by the way, was a very, very brief conversation, and I don't know if we have time for a breakout session, but what I want to, look at is maybe we room deep over the next maybe 2 to 3 minutes. If you can share whatever it is that came up for you, either on chat or unmute and share. So some comments coming through. Just wonder how it would feel at the end if coach decide to go to somebody else. Yeah, perfectly okay if the coachee decides to go to somebody else. It just means that it's, therefore a little bit of a sales mindset that we need to develop. Some say yes, some say no. So what? Move on is a lesson that I learned from my sales trainer many, many years ago, right? So how do we do that? So it's a taster, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Oops, sorry, that moved faster than I'd expected. Oops, sorry about that. So please go ahead and continue to share on chat whatever it is that came up for you. And, is there an opportunity for you to be bold and courageous? Yes, absolutely. If somebody is hesitant, please don't over talk, over explain, over justify. Silence is a great friend of coaches. And if there's a long pause, allow the client time. Say, Aditi, it looks like you're thinking quite deeply about this, or just don't say anything, right? If you're challenged, acknowledge the challenge and say, wow, that's a dimension that I haven't considered. I welcome that. Thank you for being so transparent and courageous to challenge, because I think we need to have enough trust to challenge each other, right? Sometimes if pricing is premium, coaches end up apologizing and they end up giving more than they should. So where do we draw the line and say, this is how generous I'm going to be, and these are the boundaries that I will draw? For one coaching engagement with an organization, I said, I will add 3 75-minute group coaching calls for your group of leaders. But that's that. Can you reduce the price? Well, I don't want to dilute the impact, right? So I'd rather reduce the scope instead. And then, don't be apologetic about whatever pricing, because you've done your homework and therefore you've come up with that. And the oopsies, I think these are fairly straightforward. I would say trying to be over cute, over clever, trying to use your position or authority or competence, or, hey, I have X number of years of experience. There's no need for any of that, right? I usually have 2 laptops just to make sure that there is no tech glitch. And here are things that I will absolutely emphasize, right? There are certain things that don't require talent. Being well prepared, being on time, being professionally dressed, making sure there's nothing shoddy about either my content, my appearance, my presence. Doing the right thing, being ethical, making the effort, making sure that I'm engaged. Because if I don't seem engaged, then how can, somebody talked about client being passive or not engaged. We can deal with that, but we ourselves, you don't want to be passive. I always talk about confident body language. Sometimes I don't see coaches use their hands at all. So please demonstrate confidence. Look into the camera. Greatest coaches are very coachable. So if I'm going to coach you, I must also be willing to be coachable. So we're always arriving at some place at the end of a chemistry call. And someone said, what happens if there's no conversion? Someone talked about performance pressure. We can take that away from us and we look at, are we arriving at a yes or are we arriving at the truth? And the truth may mean we go ahead. The truth may seem like we're not a fit. The truth may be that not right now. You're much better served by arriving at the truth than by, excuse me, by the pressure of getting to a yes, right? So in the few minutes we have, maybe you can share on chat one adjective that describes who are you going to be in your next coaching chemistry call.
Hi, Anita. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, loud and clear.
May I ask a question, please?
Yes, of course.
Okay, I want to know, does a coach charge for discovery chemistry calls, or is that something
I'm
that
sorry,
we...
can you say that again?
Yeah, should we charge for a discovery or a chemistry call?
They're generally not charged. And it's up to you to say how, again, individually, if you're doing this individually, then you can decide whether it's 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 60 minutes. Generally speaking, really premium coaches, they only do about 15 to 20-minute chemistry calls. But you can do 30 minutes. But if you're aligned with an organization, they may have a point of view on, hey, we generally do 45-minute chemistry calls. Because remember, somebody talked about how, so much is shared. Is there enough space for us to actually have a chemistry session? Because so much of time is spent in background, context, etc. So generally, I have found 45 minutes to be that sweet spot.
So then my follow-up question to that
Yeah.
is that, so the reason I'm here is because I recently had not so pleasant email from a client that I had shared a proposal to, and they said that this all sounds like very AI, very chat GPT, whereas it's just a structured email that was sent to them. So I want to know then, how do you deal with that sort of a situation where you're naturally just writing in a structured format,
Yeah.
but now it sounds like AI. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think the most honest way of responding to that is to say, this is usually the coaching approach that I use or the structure that I use, independent of AI tools. You're welcome to have a chemistry session with me, or you're welcome to have a conversation with me to just understand this better. Because it's one thing to see an email, it's another thing to have a real-time conversation. You're welcome to offer, hey, I'm happy to meet you in person. Because in person, there's no AI, there's nothing, there's me and you, right? And there's our whole combined energy and presence. So sometimes that can create a shift. But in a world surrounded by AI, and AI is a friend, an intern that's available to us, we must use it, but we must use it in the most meaningful manner. AI is not going away anywhere, right? So I think a combination of all of those approaches could help salvage, or they may say, I'm not interested, and that's okay. Always leave the door open for a further conversation, right? Thank you for asking that. I'm seeing some great responses: authentic self, courageous, curious, yes, authenticity, being intentional. Absolutely. I love that I'm seeing courage so much and accepting of all outcomes. Compassion and openness, absolutely. Being relaxed and as much as possible your best self. Yes. Being relaxed is a huge bonus that allows us to really focus on our breath, and it sends more oxygen to the brain. When there's more oxygen in the brain, there's greater clarity of thought. When it's clearer here, it's clearer in what we say. So I'm going to stop at that. And thank you very much for being such an engaged audience. Happy to connect with you all on LinkedIn or have a deeper conversation any point, because this is something I care deeply about. Thanks very much, Aditi, and great to see you all today.
Anitha, thank you so much for doing this.
Yes.
People, let's have a round of applause for Anitha and
You're so
Aditi.
kind.
Aditi, thank you for being so authentic and so open with us. Thank you for bringing in what you were wanting to explore. People, those who don't know, and Anitha has been very humble and not said. So let me just share that Anitha is one of our most sought after coaches, and she aces at her chemistry sessions, which is why she's here. And I'm so happy, Anitha, that you agreed to do this. Really, a lot of learnings for all of us. So thank you so much. Chaitanya, over to you.
Thank you. Very kind of you, Mother.
Thank you so much, Anitha. Thank you for this wonderful session. As you can see, people really loved it. For that, thank you so much, Aditi, for being the client in the call as well. And also, everyone, I have shared the CCU certificate link in the chat box. Please do fill out the form in order to receive your CCU certificates. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Thank you. See you next Tuesday. Bye bye.
See you
Bye-bye.
then. Take good care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.